somewhere. We're concluding our final reading, and it's the beautiful part where Garuda has come to Kakavashundi with this doubt that he has of that on the battlefield he helped Ram escape from the coiled serpent arrows, and he wondered why Ram couldn't do it himself, and so he had this little doubt all through, and so he went to Kakavashundi to talk about it and why he had this doubt in Ram. And so Kakavashundi is telling his wonderful stories of all his incarnations. And his latest adventure, and there are so many, was that he was arguing with a sage, Lomasha. And the sage so wanted him to agree with him, and he wouldn't. He wanted, and you'll have to reread that if you haven't, but all of a sudden, the sage realizes after he's cursed him to be in a crow's body, the pariah of all the birds, for being so stubborn and not honoring his prestigiousness, he realizes that Kakavashundi is so devoted, and so he takes his curse to make it into more of a blessing. And so the sage is speaking to Kakavashundi and saying to him, even though he's turned him into a crow and all these other curses have followed it, he says, no suffering occasioned by time, fate, merit, demerit, or disposition shall ever torment you. The manifold charming mysteries of Sri Ram that are found mentioned in the Chronicles and Puranas, and either explicitly or implicitly, you will come to know without any difficulty, and the flame of your devotion to Sri Ram's feet will grow ever brighter and brighter. Whatever longing you may entertain in your mind, you shall have no difficulty in attaining it by the grace of Sri Hari. On hearing the sage's benediction, mark me, O Garuda, of steadfast reason, a deep voice, which was evidently the voice of the Supreme Spirit, was heard from the heavens. May your prophecy come to be true, O enlightened sage. He is my light in thought, word, and deed. I rejoiced to hear the heavenly voice and stood overwhelmed with love and rid of all my doubts on receiving the sage's permission in response to my prayer. I repeatedly bowed my head at his feet and gladly came away to this hermitage, having obtained by the Lord's grace a rare boon. Listen, O Lord of the feathered creatures. I have now lived in this hermitage for 27 rounds of creation. I am ever engaged in hymning the praises of Sri Ram, the Lord of Raghus, while enlightened birds reverently listen to them. Each time the hero of Raghu's line assumes the form of a man in the city of Ayodhya for the sake of his devotees, I go and stay at the capital of Sri Ram and enjoy the spectacle of his childish sports. Again, enshrining an image of the child Ram in my heart, I return to my hermitage, O King of the birds. I have now told you all the circumstances that invested me with the form of a crow, and have also replied to all your queries. The glory of devotion to Sri Ram is superb indeed. I love this body only because it was this body that devotion to Sri Ram's feet sprang up in my heart. I was blessed with the sight of my Lord, and all my doubts vanished. I stubbornly upheld the cause of devotion for which the great sage Lomasha cursed me, but eventually I obtained a boon, which is difficult even for the sages to obtain. Witness the efficacy of adoration. They who knowingly cast aside such devotion and take pains to inquire mere wisdom are fools who would leave me alone, who would leave alone the cow of plenty at their own house and knock about in search of the milkweed plant to get milk out of. Listen, O Lord of the winged creatures. The fools who ignore bhakti and seek happiness by any other means stupidly seek to swim across the ocean without the help of a vessel. It's it. instructed you. Oh. Technical. Although the sage instructed you in the same, my lord, you did not show the same amount of regard for knowledge as for devotion. Explain to me, my gracious lord, all the difference between gnosis and devotion. The wise crow was gratified to hear the question of Garuda, the enemy of serpents, and politely replied, "There's no difference whatsoever between gnosis, knowledge, and devotion. Both are equally efficacious in relieving the torments of birth and death. Great sages nonetheless point out some differences between the two, my lord. Listen to them with rapt attention, O chief of the birds. Wisdom, dispassion, yoga, union with God, and realization, mark me, are all masculine in concept. O Mount of Srihari, the might of man is formidable indeed, while a woman is naturally weak and dull by her very birth. Symbolically within all of us. But the man alone who is unattached and resolute of mind can forswear women, not the sensualness who has turned his face against the feet of Sri Ram, the hero of Raghu's line. But even such an enlightened sage, O Mount of Sri Hari, succumbs to the charms of a pretty woman at the very sight of her moonlight face. It is God Vishnu's own Maya, deluding potency, that manifests itself in the form of a woman. Here do I not speak in a partisan spirit, but merely state the view of the Vedas and Puranas, as well as of the saints. A woman is never enamored of another woman's beauty. This, O enemy of the serpents, is a strange phenomenon. Maya and bhakti devotion, mark me, both belong to the feminine group, as everyone knows. Again, bhakti is beloved of Sri Ram, the hero of Raghu's line, while poor Maya is a mere dancing girl. The Lord of the Raghus is well disposed towards bhakti, hence Maya is terribly afraid of her. Nay, Maya shrinks at the very sight of the man in whose heart ever abides unobstructed the peerless and guileless spirit of devotion, and cannot wield her authority over him. Knowing this, sages who have realized the truth solicit bhakti, which is the fountain of all blessings. No one can speedily know this secret of Sri Ram, the Lord of Raghus, but whoever comes to know it by the grace of Raghupati himself can never fall a prey to infatuation even in a dream. Further hear, most sagacious Garuda, the distinction between gnosis and devotion, by hearing which one develops perpetual and uninterrupted love for Sri Ram's feet. Listen, dear Garuda, to this unutterable romance, which can only be comprehended by the mind, but is incapable of expression. The soul is a particle of the divinity, immortal, conscious, untainted by Maya and blissful by nature. Such a soul, my Lord, has allowed itself to be dominated by Maya and has been caught in its own trap like a parrot or a monkey. Matter and spirit have been linked together with a knot which, though imaginary, is difficult to untie. Since the soul has become worldly, it can have no happiness till this knot is untied. The Vedas and Puranas have suggested a number of devices for untying the knot, but the knot, far from being resolved, becomes harder and harder. The interior of the soul being utterly clouded with the darkness of ignorance, the knot cannot ever be perceived. How then can it be untied? If God were to bring about such conditions as are depicted below, even then the disentanglement of the knot is problematic. Suppose by the grace of Sri Hari, the blessed cow in the shape of sattva, genuine piety, comes to abide in one's heart, and feeds on the green herbage in the shape of japa, muttering of prayers, austere penance, sacred observances. The yamas are forms of self-restraint vis-a-vis continence, veracity, non-violence, non-stealing, and non-possession. The 5 niyamas, or positive virtues, external and internal purity, contentment, self-study, self-discipline, and surrender to God. and innumerable other blessed virtues and religious practices recommended by the Vedas. Milk begins to flow from her teats like us hope when she is united with her newly born calf in the form of love. Quietism serves as the cord by which her hind legs are tied in order to milk her. Faith represents the pot in which the cow is milked, while a pure mind, which is as one's beck and call, plays the role of a milker. Having thus drawn the milk in the shape of supreme righteousness, one should boil it, brother, on the fire of desirelessness. When boiled, it should be cooled down with the breath of contentment and forbearance, and congealed by mixing with a little curd in the shape of fortitude and mind control. The curd thus made should be churned in an earthen vase of cheerfulness, with the churning stick of reflection, and fastening the stick to the host of self-restraint with the cord of truthful and agreeable words. And by this process of churning, one should extract the pure, excellent, and holy butter of dispassion. After kindling the fires of yoga, concentration of mind, one's past karma, both good and evil, should be consigned to it as fuel, and the butter placed on it. When the scum in the form of worldly attachment is burnt, the ghee, clarified butter that is left in the form of gnosis, should be cooled down by buddhi, reason. Having obtained this pure ghee in the form of wisdom, buddhi, which is the nature of understanding, should fill with it the lamp of chitta, reasoning faculty, and making a stance of even-mindedness, set the lamp securely there, extracting cotton in the form of the transcendent state out of the bowl of the three states of consciousness, waking, dream, and dreamless sleep, and the three modes of prakriti, sattva, rajas, and tamas. The same should be carded and fashioned into a strong wick. In this manner, one should light the glorious lamp of immediate knowledge, by merely approaching which moths in the shape of vanity, etc., are all consumed. The constant awareness that I am the same, Brahm, represents the same dazzling flame of the lamp. In this way, when the blessedness of self-realization sheds its bright luster, the error of duality, the root of worldly existence, is dispersed, and the infinite darkness of infatuation, etc., which forms the family of avidya, disappears. Having thus procured a light, the buddhi referred to above sits in the chamber of the heart to untie the ligature that binds the spirit with matter. The soul can hope to attain its object only in the event of buddhi succeeding in untying it. But when Maya, O king of the birds, finds her attempting to untie the knot, she creates many difficulties. She sends forth, brother, a number of riddhis and siddhis, riches and supernatural powers in their embodied forms that try to entice her cupidity. By artifice, force, or fraud, they approach her and put off the light by fanning it with the end of their garment. If the buddhi happens to be most sagacious, she refuses even to look at them, considering them to be her enemies. If the impediments fall to distract her, the gods next proceed to create trouble. The various apertures of the body that locate the five senses are so many windows in the chamber of the heart, each of which is presided over by a god. Even as they find the gust of sensuality entering the chamber, the gods wantonly throw the shutters of these apertures wide open. As soon as the blast penetrates the chamber of the heart, the light of immediate knowledge gets extinguished. In this way, while the ligature binding the spirit with matter remains untied, the light of self-realization also disappears, and the understanding gets bewildered when buffeted by the blast of sensuality. Knowledge is welcome neither to the senses nor the gods presiding over them, who are ever fond of sensuous enjoyments. And the buddhi, too, having been distracted by the blast of sensuality, who can light the lamp again as before? When the light of wisdom thus extinguished, the soul then goes again through the manifold agonies of transmigration. Sri Hari's deluding potency, O Lord of the winged creatures, is most difficult to cross. It cannot easily be crossed over. Gnosis is difficult to expound, difficult to grasp and difficult to achieve through practice. And if by chance one succeeds in attaining it, there are many impediments in the way of preserving it. The path of wisdom is like the edge of a sword. One is apt to fall from it very soon, O King of the Birds. He alone who successfully treads it attains to the supreme state of final emancipation. But this supreme state of final beatitude is most difficult to attain. So declare the saints as well as the Puranas, Vedas, Agamas, Tantras. By worshipping Sri Ram, my Lord, the same beatitude comes unsolicited, ever against our will. Water cannot stay except on land, notwithstanding our best efforts. Even so, mark you, O King of the Birds. The joy of final beatitude cannot stay apart from devotion to Sri Hari. Realizing this, the wise devotees of Sri Hari spurn final emancipation and remain enamored by devotion. By practicing devotion, ignorance, which is the root of metapsychosis, is eradicated without any effort or exertion. In the same way, we eat for our own gratification, but the gastric fire digests the food so eaten without any effort on our part. What fool is there who does not welcome such devotion to Sri Hari, who is so easy and delightful at the same time? The ocean of transmigration, O enemy of serpents, cannot be crossed without cultivating the same feeling of Sri Ram as a servant cherishes towards his master. Knowing this to be the established doctrine, adore the lotus feet of Sri Ram. The Lord of the Raghus can make the animate inanimate and the inanimate animate. The soul that adores such an omnipotent Lord are blessed indeed. I have expounded at length the established doctrine relating to gnosis, knowledge. Hear now the virtue of devotion, which has been likened to a jewel. The beautiful wish-yielding gem of devotion to Sri Ram is an embodiment of supreme effulgence, which sheds its radiance day and night, requiring neither a vessel, nor clarified butter, nor wick to light it. He in whose heart, O Garuda, such a jewel abides, is not haunted by poverty in the shade of infatuation. No blast of greed can ever extinguish this light, which dispels the overpowering gloom of ignorance, and the swarms of moths in the shape of vanity, etc., keep away from it in a mood of frustration. Nay, vicious propensities like lust dare not approach him in whose heart the gem of devotion abides. For him, venom is transformed into ambrosia, and enemies turn into friends. Nobody can attain happiness without this jewel. Again, he is never attacked by the terrible mental diseases from which all living beings are grievously suffering. He in whose heart the gem of devotion to Sri Ram abides cannot have the least woe even in a dream. They alone are paragons of wisdom in this world, who spare no pains to secure this gem. Although this jewel is manifest in the world, none can find it without the grace of Sri Ram. There are easy devices to finding it, but luckless souls attempt harder methods. The Vedas and Puranas represent holy mountains, and the stories of Sri Ram, the many glories mined, located in their midst. The saints are expert mineralogists, and their penetrating intellect, the pickaxe, while spiritual wisdom and dispassion, Garuda, are the two eyes surveying the minds. Any creature who looks for it with faith succeeds in discovering the gem of devotion, a mine of all blessing. I have this conviction in my heart, my Lord, that a servant of Sri Ram's is greater than Sri Ram himself. While Sri Ram is the ocean, the wise saints are like the rain clouds, or, to use another metaphor, while Sri Hari is the sandal tree, the saints represent the winds that diffuse its perfume. Devotion to Sri Hari, which is so delightful, is the reward of all spiritual endeavors. None has ever secured it except through a saint. Realizing this, whoever cultivates the fellowship of saints finds devotion to Sri Ram easy of attainment, O King of the Birds. The Vedas are compared to the ocean of milk. Spiritual wisdom plays the role of Mount mandara, while saints are the gods who churn out nectar in the form of sacred legends, and devotion represents its sweetness, using dispassion as a shield for self-defense, and slaying with words of wisdom enemies in the form of vanity, greed, and infatuation. It is devotion to Sri Hari that triumphs. Ponder and realize this, O King of the Birds. Garuda, the King of the Birds, further submitted in loving tones. If you cherish fondness for me, my gracious master, kindly recognize me as your servant and answer me the following 7 questions. Tell me, first of all, my strong-minded master, which form of all is the most difficult to obtain? Next, consider and tell me briefly, which is the greatest misery and which, again, is the highest pleasure? You know the essential characteristics of the saints and the evil-minded. Therefore, describe their innate disposition. Also tell me which is the highest religious merit made known in the Vedas, which, again, is the most terrible sin. Further, tell me, in unambiguous terms, the diseases of the mind. Omniscient as you are and richly endowed with compassion. Listen, dear Garuda, with reverence and rapt attention while I tell you briefly my views on these questions. There is no other form as good as the human body. Every living creature, whether animate or inanimate, craves for it. It is the latter that takes the soul either to hell or to heaven, or again to final beatitude, and is the bestower of blessings in the form of wisdom, dispassion, and devotion. Men who fail to adore Sri Hari even after obtaining this body and wallow in the barest pleasures of sense, throw away the philosopher's stone from the palm of their hand and take bits of glass in exchange for the same. There is no misery in the world as terrible as poverty, and no blessing as great as communion with saints. Beneficent in thought, word, and deed is the innate disposition of saints, O King of the Birds. The saints undergo suffering in the interest of others, while impious wretches do so with a view to tormenting others. Tender-hearted saints, like the birch tree, submit to the greatest torture, even allow their skin to be peeled off for the good of others, while the wicked, like the hemp, have their skin flayed off and perish in agony in order to be able to bind others in the form of cords. Listen, O enemy of serpents. Like the rat and the serpent, the wicked injure others without any gain to themselves. Having destroyed others' prosperity, they perish themselves, even as the hail dissolves after destroying the crop. The elevation of the wicked, like the rising of a comet, which is a detestable heavenly body, is a source of calamity to the world. The advancement of a saint, on the other hand, is ever conducive to joy, which at the rising of the sun and the moon bring delight to the whole universe. A vow of nonviolence is the highest religious merit known to the Vedas, and there's no sin as grievous as speaking ill of others. A reviler of Lord Hara and his own preceptor take the form of a frog after his death, and his birth is in that form is repeated 1,000 times. A reviler of the Brahmanas, after suffering tortures in a number of hells, is born on earth in the form of a crow. Those conceited souls who revile the gods and the Vedas are cast into hell, known as Rarav. They who delight in vilifying the saints are reborn as owls who love the night of error, and for whom the sun of wisdom has set. The fools who censor all the reborn are reborn as bats. Note now, dear Garuda, the diseases of the mind from which everyone suffers. Infatuation is the root of all ailment, and from these again and again arise many other troubles. Lust is a counterpart of wind, and inordinate greed corresponds to an abundance of phlegm, while anger represents bile, which constantly burns the breast. Should all these 3 combined, they result what is known as sanipata, a derangement of the aforesaid 3 humors of the body, causing fever, which is of a dangerous type. The craving of the manifold pleasures of the sense, so difficult to realize, are the various distempers, which are too numerous to name. The feeling of mindness corresponds to ringworms. Envy represents itches, while joy and grief correspond to a disease of the throat marked by the excessive enlargement of its glands. Grudging contemplation of others' happiness represents consumption, while wickedness and perversity of soul corresponds to leprosy. Egoism is a counterpoint to the most painful gout, while hypocrisy, deceit, arrogance, and pride correspond to the disease known as draconitis, which is marked by the presence in the body of a parasite known as the guinea worm. Thirst for enjoyment represents the most advanced type of dropsy, while the three types of craving, those for progeny, riches, and honor, correspond to the violent quartan agu. Jealousy and thoughtlessness are the two types of fever. There are many more fell diseases too numerous to mention. People die even of one disease, while I have spoken of many incurable diseases which constantly torment the soul. How then can it find peace? There are sacred vows and religious observances and practices, austere penances, spiritual wisdom, sacrifices, japa, muttering of prayers, charity, and myriads of other remedies too, but the maladies just enumerated do not yield to these, O Mount of Sri Hari. Thus, every creature in this world is ailing and is further afflicted with grief and joy, love, fear, and desolation. I have mentioned only a few diseases of the mind, although everyone is suffering from them. Few are able to detect them. These wretches, the plague of mankind, diminish to a certain extent on being detected, but are not completely destroyed. Fed by the unwholesome diet of sensuality, they sprout, even in the mind of sages, say nothing of poor mortals. All these ailments can no doubt be eradicated if, by Sri Ram's grace, the following factors combined. There must be faith in words, of the physician in the form of a true preceptor, and the regime is indifferent to the pleasure of the senses. Devotion to the Lord of the Ragus is the life-giving herb to be used as a recipe, while a devout mind serves as the vehicle in which it is taken. By this process, the ailment can certainly be eradicated. Otherwise, all our efforts will fail to get rid of them. The mind should be accounted as cured, my Lord, only when the heart gathers strength in the form of dispassion. Appetite in the shape of good resolution grows stronger and stronger every day, and weakness in the form of sensual appetite goes. Being thus rid of all diseases, when the soul bathes in the pure water of wisdom, the heart is saturated with devotion to Sri Ram. Lord Shiva, Brahma the unborn, Sanak and his three brothers, Narada and other sages who are adept in the investigation of Brahm, all are of the opinion, O Lord of the winged creatures, that one should cultivate devotion to the lotus feet of Sri Ram. The Vedas and Puranas and all other scriptures declare that there can be no happiness without practicing devotion to the Lord of the Ragus. It would be easier for hair to grow on the shell of a tortoise, or for the progeny of a barren woman to slay anyone, or for flowers of every description to appear in the air, than for any creature to be happy, even though hostile to Sri Hari. Sooner shall thirst be slacked by drinking of a mirage, or horns sprout out of a hare's head, or darkness efface the sun, than a creature who has turned his face against Sri Ram find happiness. Sooner shall fire appear out of ice than an enemy of Sri Ram's enjoy happiness. Sooner shall butter be churned out of water or oil be extracted from sand than the ocean of worldly existence be crossed without adoring Sri Hari. This is a conclusion which cannot be set aside. The Lord can exalt a mosquito to the position of Brahma, the creator, and degrade Brahma to the position lower than that of a mosquito. Realizing this, the wise discard all doubts and worship Sri Ram. I tell you, by my considered view and my words can never be untrue. Men who worship Sri Ram are able to cross the most turbulent ocean of mundane existence. I have narrated, my Lord, the incomparable story of Sri Hari according to my own lights, now briefly and now in detail. The conclusion of the Vedas, O enemy of serpents, is just this. Forgetting all other duties, Sri Ram alone should be adored. Who else is worth serving? If you renounce the Almighty, Lord of the Raghus, who regards even a fool like me as his own, you are wisdom incarnate and have no infatuation. On the other hand, you have done me a unique favor, my Lord, in that you asked me to repeat the most sacred story of Sri Ram, which delights the soul of sages like Sukha, Sanak, and the others, as well as of Lord Shambhu. The fellowship of saints is difficult to get in this world, be it for the twinkling of an eye or for half an hour, even for once. Ponder in your heart, Garuda, and see for yourself whether I am competent in any way to worship the hero of Raghu's line. The vilest of birds and impure in every way as I was, the Lord has made me known as purifier of the world. Though vile in every way, I am blessed, most blessed today in that Sri Ram has acknowledged me as one of his own servants, and therefore vouchsafed to me the fellowship of a saint like you. My Lord, I have spoken to the best of my ability and have concealed nothing, but the story of Sri Ram, the Lord of Raghus, is vast as an ocean. Can anyone find the bottom of it? The wise Kakabashundi rejoiced again and again as he pondered Sri Ram's manifold virtues, that I should enjoy the grace of Sri Ram, the Lord of Raghus, whose glory is sung by the Vedas only in negative terms, as not that, whose might, majesty, and glory are unequal, and whose feet are worthy of adoration even to Lord Shiva and Brahma, the unborn creator, betrays his supreme tenderness of heart. Nowhere have I heard of, much less seen, such a kind disposition. To whom shall I compare the Lord of Raghus with chief of birds? Strivers and perfect souls, the liberated and the unworldly minded, the seers and learned men, those knowing the secrets of karma, duty, and those who have renounced all action, yogis, mystics, and valiant heroes, great ascetics and wise men, pious souls and men of erudition and valor, valiant heroes, great ascetics and wise men pious, every man who have ever realized the self, none of these can cross the ocean of mundane existence without adoring my Lord Sri Ram, to whom I bow again and again and yet again. I bow once more to that imperishable Lord by approaching whom for shelter even sinful souls like me get purified. He whose name is unfailing, an unfailing remedy for the disease of birth and death, and alleviates the three kinds of terrible pain. May the gracious Lord remain propitious both to me and to you. On hearing Bashundi's blessed discourse and perceiving his devotion to Sri Ram's feet, Garuda, who was now rid of all doubt, replied in endearing terms. I have attained the object of my life, now that I have listened to your discourse. Imbued with the nectar of devotion to Sri Ram's feet, my love for Sri Ram's feet has been renewed, and the trouble created by Maya, the Lord's deluding potency, has all ended. You have been a vessel to me, drifting as I was in the ocean of infatuation, and have afforded me delight in various ways. My Lord, I am, however, incapable of repaying my obligation to you, and simply adore your feet again and again. You are fully sated and a lover of Sri Ram. No one is so blessed as you, venerable sir. Saints, trees, rivers, mountains, and the earth, all these operate for the good of others. The poets have declared the heart of a saint to be as soft as butter, but they did not know what should be said, for while butter melts only when the same is heated on fire, the holy saint melts at the suffering of others. My life and birth into this world has been both rewarded, and by your grace all my doubts have fled. Ever regard me as your own servant. Again and again did the chief of the birds speak thus, O Uma. Lovingly bowing his head at Kakabashundi's feet, Garuda, who was so result of purpose, then flew away to Vaikuntha, the divine abode of Lord Vishnu, with an image of Sri Ram, the hero of Raghu's line, imprinted on his heart. Girija, there is no gain so valuable as the fellowship of saints, and the same, however, cannot be had without the grace of Sri Hari, so declare the Vedas and Puranas. I have thus repeated the most sacred narrative, by hearing which one is freed from the bonds of worldly existence and comes to have devotion to the lotus feet of the all-merciful Sri Ram, who is a wish-yielding tree to the supplicant. Again, they who listen to this narrative attentively are absolved of sins committed with the mind, speech, or body. Pilgrimages to sacred places and other means of self-purification, perfection in yoga, mind control, dispassion and wisdom, sacred rites and religious practices, vows and charitable acts of various kinds, self-denial and self-control, japa, muttering of prayers, and austere penances, performing manifold sacrifices, compassion to all living beings, ministering to the brahmanas and one's preceptor, learning, modesty, right judgment, and nobility of mind and character, in short, all the expedients extolled in the Vedas. Bhavani, have but one reward, devotion to Sri Hari. Such devotion to the Lord of Raghus, as has been glorified in the Vedas, is attained to by some rare souls by the grace of Sri Ram himself. Although such devotion to Sri Hari is scarce attainable even by the sages, it can be easily attained by men who constantly listen to this story with faith. He alone is omniscient and accomplished. He alone is wise. He alone is an ornament of the globe, learned and magnificent. He alone is pious, and he the savior of his race, whose mind is devoted to the feet of Sri Ram. He alone is perfect in correct behavior and most sagacious. He alone has thoroughly grasped the conclusion of the Vedas, and he alone is a seer, a man of erudition and staunch in battle, who adores the hero of Raghu's line in a guileless spirit. Blessed is the land where flows the celestial stream, the Ganga. Blessed the wife who observes a vow of fidelity to her husband. Blessed is the monarch who administers justice. Blessed the brahmanas who swerve not from his duty. Blessed is the wealth which is used to the best advantage. And I love the footnote on that one. Wealth invariably meets with one of the following three fates. It is either devoted to some charitable purpose, squandered away on luxury and enjoyment, or lost. Evidently, the first of these is the best use. The wealth of the miser, who neither devotes it to the service of the needy nor spends it on his own comfort, meets with the third, which is the worst fate. Listen, Uma, the blessed is the family worthy of adoration for the whole world, and most hallowed too, in which is born a humble devotee of the illustrious Ram, the hero of Raghu's line. I have told you this narrative according to my own lights, although at first I kept it secret. I saw excessive fondness for the same in your heart when I narrated to you the story of Sri Ram, the Lord of Raghus. The story, however, should not be repeated to a perverse knave who does not listen attentively to the story of Sri Hari, nor should it be recited to a greedy, irascible, or lustful person who worships not the Lord of all animate and inanimate creation. It should never be repeated to a Brahmana hater, or be he a monarch or as great as Indra, the Lord of the celestials. They alone are qualified to hear Sri Ram's narrative, who are extremely fond of communion with holy men. They alone are fit to hear it, who are devoted to the feet of their preceptor and are lovers of propriety and the lights of the Brahmanas. The story affords special delight to them who hold the graceful Lord of the Raghus dear as life. He who seeks devotion to the feet of Sri Ram, or to enjoy the state of eternal bliss, should fondly drink in this story with the cup of their ears. I have narrated, Girija, the story of Sri Ram, which wipes out the sin of the Kali age and removes the impurities of the mind. The narrative of Sri Ram, as declared by the Vedas and the seers, is a life-giving herb to cure the disease of birth and death. It has 7 beautiful stairs, which are so many roads as were leading to the goal of devotion to the Lord of Raghus. He alone who enjoys the utmost grace of Sri Hari can set his foot on this road, the road to devotion. Men who sing this story in a guileless spirit attain the object of their soul's desire. Nay, they who repent or listen to it, or even approve of its recitation across the ocean of mundane existence as they would the print of a cow's hoof. Girija, daughter of the Mountain King, was greatly delighted at heart to hear the whole narrative and replied in pleasing tones. By the grace of my Lord, yourself, my doubts have disappeared and my devotion to Sri Ram's feet has been renovated. By your blessing, O Lord of the universe, I have now attained the object of my life. Unswerving devotion to Sri Ram has sprung in my heart, and all my afflictions have ended. This blessed dialogue between Lord Shambhu and Goddess Uma begets joy and lifts the gloom of depression. It puts an end to transmigration, disperses doubt, delights the devotee, and is dear to the saints. To the worshippers of Sri Ram, nothing is so dear as this narrative. By the Lord of Sri Ram, the Lord of the Raghus, himself I have sung to the best of my ability this sacred and charming story. In this age of Kali, no other discipline is of any anvil, neither yoga, mind control, nor sacrifices, nor japa, muttering of prayers, nor austerity, penance, nor any sacred vows, nor ritual. Ram alone should be remembered. Ram alone should be glorified, and it is the catalogue of Ram's virtue alone that should be given ear to. Forswearing perversity, my soul adore him whose great vow it is to sanctify the fallen, as is declared by seers and saints, the Vedas and Puranas, who has not secured redemption by worshiping Sri Ram. Listen, my stupid soul, who has not been saved by adoring Sri Ram, the purifier of the fallen, the harlot Pingala, Ajmila, the hunter Valmiki, the vulture Jatayu, the elephant, and many other wretches have been delivered by him. Even Abhiras, a hilly tribe inhabiting the southwest corner in ancient times, Yavanas, Kiratas, Beals, Kashas, another hill tribe found in Assam, Kandalas, the pariah, and others. The very embodiments of grievous sin are hallowed by merely uttering your name even once. I adore you, O Ram. Men who repeat to others, listen to when repeated by, or chant alone the narrative of Sri Ram, the ornament of Raghu's race, thereby wipe out the sins that are incident to the Kali age, as well as the impurities of their soul, and ascend to the abode of Sri Ram without any difficulty. Nay, the chief of Raghus cures the perversities caused by the fivefold ignorances of the men who treasure up in their heart even a few kupayas, a small 4-footed verses of this narrative that appeal to them as most charming. If there is anyone who is all beautiful, all wise, and all merciful, and who is fond of the forlorn, it is Ram, and Ram alone. Who else can compare with him as a disinterested friend and a bestower of eternal bliss? Nowhere can we find a Lord like Sri Ram, by an iota of whose grace even the dull-witted Tulsidas has found supreme peace. There is no one so miserable as I, nor such a friend of the miserable as you, O hero of Raghu's line. Realizing this, O jewel of Raghu's race, take away my fear of transmigration, which is so terrible. May you ever be so dear to me, Ram, as a woman is dear to a lustful man, and as Lusar is dear to the greedy, O Lord of Raghus. The same mysterious Manas Ramayana, the story of Sri Ram figuratively spoken of as a Manas lake, which was composed of yore by the blessed Lord Shambhu, the best of all poets, with the object of developing unceasing devotion to the lotus feet of the all-beautiful Sri Ram, has been likewise rendered into the vulgar tongue by Tulsidas for dispelling the gloom of his heart, cognizing the fact that is devoted to the name of Sri Ram, the Lord of the Raghus. This glorious, holy, purifying, blessed, and most limpid Manas lake of Sri Ram's exploits ever begets happiness. Nay, it bestows both wisdom and devotion, wipes out delusion, infatuation, and impurity, and is brimful with the water of love. Men who devoutly take a plunge into it are never scorched with the burning rays of the sun of worldly illusion. Thus ends the seventh descent into Manas Lake of Sri Ram's exploits that eradicates all impurities of the Kali age. Om Jai Sri Ram.